Hello, welcome to the Q&A Cafe as we begin our October season, which is 22 years since we started in 2001. Yes, indeed. I mean, it's hanging in there. I just want to say a quick remark about myself, and then the rest of the focus is on Kitty Kelley. If I look a little weird, I do, because I face planted on 20th Street 2 weeks ago. And so if you see little bits of purple, and I've got very artful makeup on, and my concussion is recessing. So no, but hey, you live in DC. I mean, I think it's a rite of passage living here to face plant on one of our sidewalks.
Hi.
And you know, as bad as it was for me, and all the medical stuff was fine, I was thinking very much about Kitty Kelley, the legend, the treasure, Georgetown's treasure. I just had a concussion. She had Frank Sinatra come after her. So, right?
Right.
Yeah, so, you know. Anyway, Kitty, welcome to the Q&A Cafe.
Thank you, Carol.
And you are indeed a treasure and a legend. And it's always so interesting to me when I talk to the youngs, you know, they go, Kitty Kelley lives in Washington? I say, not only does she live in Washington, she lives in Georgetown. And she knows more about almost every house in Georgetown than any of the people who live in them. Yeah. Do you think about that when you walk around?
No, I think you're giving me far too much credit.
Take it. I take it like warm honey. But honestly, I mean, I know I walk around Georgetown and I look at certain houses and I think, I know what happened in there, and I know what happened in there. But you really know what happened.
No, I think you probably know more, and I'd love to hear more.
Yeah. Well,
Always.
But seriously, this is it is a village of history, but ghosts, and I would think so many of your books, in some one way or another, intersect with Georgetown. Jackie O intersected with Georgetown.
Elizabeth Taylor
definitely intersected.
Frank Sinatra.
Yeah.
Nancy Reagan, certainly.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't know that the Bushes ever had a foothold in Georgetown, but it's entirely possible.
I think they tried.
Okay, well, that's a little shade there. There's a reason that if you don't know this, it's wonderful trivia, and it could come up in a trivia game. Kitty's license plate is meow.
Do you know something? It was in 1991, and I had just published the Nancy Reagan book, and it was on the cover of Time and Newsweek, front page of the New York Times. It was so controversial. The only good thing that was happening, I was falling in love. And who turned out to be my husband, he called my assistant and said, I really want to get Kitty vanity plates. Do you think I should get Kitty K or K Kelley? He was a physician. He said, I've got a patient right now. Call me back. Don't say anything to her. And of course, Melissa came in and told me exactly what he said. And I said, call him back and tell him the truth. And she looked at me and she said, what's the truth? I said, the book is so controversial that if people knew it was Kitty, they'd probably egg the car. And she said, okay. So she called him back and she said, Dr. Zucker, blah, 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 and egg the car. And he said, I got it. No problem. I came home that night and the license plate, meow.
That's wonderful. Tell the story of how you got the car.
How I got the car?
Your publisher.
Oh, yeah, I forget what book it was, but...
Well, the publisher was Simon & Schuster. The rest, you tell the story.
Oh, that's right, Carol. And the editor at Simon & Schuster, who had bought me, was leaving Simon & Schuster, and she had just broken up with the CEO of Simon & Schuster, Dick Snyder, and she was going to Random House. And she called me and she said, Kitty, I'm really not supposed to say anything, but your book was such a big deal, I have to tell you I'm going to Random House and I can't take you with me. And I said, oh. She said, but don't say anything you're not supposed to know. So my agent called and I said, I hope there's no problem with my publishing. And she said, oh, Kitty, I'm sure there isn't. And I said, well, if there is, I would go with Joni. Well, long story short, Dick Snyder said, we want to keep her. And I had just taken a course in negotiating. And the lesson was that if you want something, you ask for 5 things and you settle for 3. I only wanted one thing, which was to stay with the person that brought me. But I said, okay, and my agent was Linda, but I said, this is what I want. Bum, bum, bum. Oh, and I didn't have a car. I said, oh, and I want a red 560 SL Mercedes Palomino interior. She said, Kitty, this is really quite impossible. I said, oh, I'm sure it is, but you'll handle it.
And you got the car.
2 weeks later, red Mercedes 560 SL.
And you still drive it.
I do still drive it. It's a 1987. And so when little kids see this old lady driving a car that says meow, they all go, Mama!
Did you then, after that successful negotiation, continue to employ those tactics going forward with similar success?
No, I didn't. After John proposed, I said, it won't cost you a Mercedes or anything. We'll get married, and I stopped my negotiations.
Let's go back a bit. What was your first book?
The very first book I ever wrote? Mm-hmm. Oh, I thought it was going to be a huge, absolutely. It was called The Glamour Spas. And I went, at that time there were only 12 fat farms in America, and I thought, I'll go to every single one of them. I'll say exactly what happens. I'll write it up, and this will be a monumental bestseller.
You'd think.
You would think then. Well, so I wrote to every beauty spa in the country and said I was doing this. There had been no book like this, and I would like to arrive on a Sunday and leave on a Sunday and take part in every program. So I started in California, and I got up to La Costa on a Sunday, and I checked in, or I went to the front desk, and I said, may I check in? She said, sit down. We had just had someone die in the mud bath, and we got this damn writer coming. So sit over there, and I'll be with you in a minute. And then the ambulances came in, and the ETs, and the EM, and I'm sitting there. So all of this happened, and they carried a
gurney,
thank
the body,
out. And I went to the front desk, and I said, I'd like to sign in now. She said, okay, your name? I gave her my name. And she went, Kelley. Oh, God. And she looked at me. I said, don't worry, I'm not going to do the mud bath. I'll do everything else, not the mud bath. Anyway, I wrote that book, and it sold 14 copies, and they were all to my mother.
Oh, Kitty, I don't believe that, but
You
still.
better believe it.
But, you know, I mean, you could write that book today and it would be a bestseller because the whole world has changed and people try to go to spas as much as they can. Did any part of that experience, what prompted you to become an artisan of the unauthorized biography? I should say a master of the unauthorized biography.
Well, what she means by unauthorized is that I have not been authorized by the subject to tell his or her life story. And I just always thought perhaps it was Catholic school upbringing that I wanted the other version. I wanted...
It's also journalism.
Right. It's been very controversial, writing unauthorized biographies.
That word is beside you in the dictionary, you know? But I mean,
Kitty Kelley, comma, controversial.
Controversial biographer. Who was first?
Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, and I was asked to do it. I said, I went to the Library of Congress, and that was back in the days when you had the card catalog. And to give an intelligent no, I said, I went to the library, and there have been 36 books written on this woman, and the publisher said, I think you can do it.
Why did they ask you to do it, do you think?
I don't know.
You know?
I don't know.
You hadn't written a proposal. This hadn't been
No,
a pitch.
there
They
was no
came to you.
proposal, no nothing. So my husband, the first one, said, do it, this will be great. And I did it. And in doing it, I interviewed John F. Kennedy's best friend, Senator George Smathers. And it was an extraordinary interview. Imagine in 1970, I forget, the book came out in 78, I think, and it was the first time that an intimate of President Kennedy had ever gone on the record to talk about the other women in his life. And I will tell you, I'm in the interview with Smathers, and it took a while to get this interview. And at one point, Senator Smathers is talking about Kennedy, and he said, well, Jack, he said, he was really something. He was just like a rooster getting on top of a hen making love. And I said, excuse me, Senator, but with all due respect, I don't know how you would know that unless you were in the room. And he looked at me and said, well, of course I was in the room. He said, Jack just loved doing it in front of people. And at that point, I stopped and I learned not to question someone. I mean, I must have sounded like an old schoolmarm. Well, Senator, you wouldn't have known that unless you were in the room.
Just
For
let
the
them
next
talk.
3 hours, I took notes, and that turned out to be truly a controversial book.
Well, tell me about the blowback, because this probably also had to be your first experience with the harsh light of resistance of what you were doing.
Do you know that the blowback is still today? I can say that to you because up until a few days ago, I was part of a book group, not this wonderful book group that's over here, but one I joined years ago, and they wanted to bring in Kathleen Kennedy Townsend, and they said she wouldn't join if Kitty Kelley was a part of it. So when you talk about blowback, this is 50 years
Yeah,
of
no,
blowback.
that's really...
Also, Jackie's half-brother, Jamie Auchincloss, spoke at great length, and she was very upset about that. And she was upset about Smathers, and there were other women in Kennedy's
But you weren't
life.
Smathers. I mean, were they upset at Smathers, or were they upset at you
No.
because of Smathers?
Me.
It's your fault.
And Senator Smathers could weather any storm. Actually, he really was charming. Really charming and very funny.
Do you read any of the Kennedy books that have come out subsequently? Like, I just read the Randy Taraborelli, whatever. I probably have his name wrong. You know who I mean, because you've mentioned him in interviews. But he did a Jackie book that came out in the last year, and I would think books like that corroborate lots of what you had early on.
I don't know. I haven't read it. And even today, I would stand by what I wrote. I will tell you, though, after you write a book, and for me, each book has taken about 4 years. Now, this is before the internet, when I had to go to the Library of Congress and go through the card catalog and get, you know.
Did you write on a typewriter or by hand?
Of course. Oh, both.
Yeah.
Oh,
Wow.
notes and even today, people come forward and tell me things. Oh, I wish I'd known you because I could have told you this and this and such and such. No biography is going to tell you absolutely everything there is, but a really good biography is going to have done so much research that you're going to get the essence of that person. I really believe that. Know it.
I don't know if you always worked in two places, but I don't know if you still keep an office down on M Street.
Just closed it.
But by going to that office to work, that made it a job, I would imagine, rather than writing at home. You know, that you went to work every day and you dove into your project. Did you have a storyboard? Did you lay out a plan? Or did you just keep researching until you reached that moment where you said, I'm done, I've got the story I want to tell?
I think you start out each book, you spend a lot of time reading everything that has been written about the person, and that is substantial given the books that I've written. And I learned to divide my files by subject, person, and date. So that means a month and a year of of that person's life. And then, so that if you came to me and said, Kitty, I want to know about that story about Frank Sinatra throwing somebody out of a plane over the sky, how would you file that? In my case, it would be filed under the date, FS, plane, something like that. So the subject files were huge, the date files were huge. It's an awful lot of paper, but it's the only way, and this is before the computer, and even now with the computer, I probably couldn't do it.
Well, which brings an important question. Have you had all your research digitized? Have you given it to a library? Where is it? I would think that it's a wealth of research and...
It is, but who would want it? I don't know. Yes, I still have it because it was an investment of many, many, many years.
Yeah.
But I don't know that people want paper anymore. Yes, I have tape recordings.
Yeah, well,
but, you know, when Frank Sinatra sued me before I had written a word, and I want to tell you that concentrates your attention. Frank Sinatra sued me for $2 million to stop the book. And at that point, I called my publisher, and they said, we don't have a book. You're on your own. I said, but he just sued me, and I have to go to court. And
had they announced it? Had there been a press release saying it was coming out?
Sinatra had made a press release.
No, but had your publisher put out a press release?
Before?
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, so they were committed.
No, they were.
Had you signed a contract with the publisher?
No, more importantly, had you cashed the check.
Ah.
And that was the first big advance I had ever gotten. It was $1 million back in the day. And they still were like this. And so I called a friend of mine. I belonged to all these independent writer groups. And she said, Kitty, this is just terrible. I said, no, I don't know what to do. And she said, we don't have any money. I said, I know. I'm not asking for money. I'm asking for people that believe in the First Amendment to stand up. And she said, wait, no money? We're there. She got on the phone. She called the American Society of Journalists and Authors. She called Washington Independent Writers. She called this one and that one. They had 6 groups. So they held a press conference. And they said, this is an example of a powerful public figure trying to silence a writer before she's written her book. Now afterwards, go ahead and sue her to kingdom come, but not now. It is against the law to do that. And this went on for 1 year.
But you're writing the book during that year.
Yes, I am, and I'm doing research. In the middle of this, the lawyers call and they say, Kitty, Sinatra's lawyers have called us, and they have a tape recording of you calling up someone and saying that you were authorized by Frank Sinatra to call them. And we're going to be meeting in Washington on Monday. Your publishing lawyers will be there, the CEO will be there, and a representative of Sinatra's will be there. I said, tell me again, you have a what? A tape recording. So I was in New York at the time researching, and my husband said, you didn't do it, there is no tape recording. I said, they're coming to Washington, there's a tape. I went crazy. I thought, I did it. By the time Monday morning came, really I was going to answer the door and just say, I did it. They brought everybody, came in, they put the tape recording on the tape recorder. And it was obviously a fake.
Yeah.
It sounded like Boy George and Minnie Mouse.
Before we had you were the first deep fake.
And you could see, they went, play it again, play it again. And you could see all these lawyers, by the third time they played it, lawyers were like this. So you knew that they too believed. Anyway, they all left, and as they're leaving, I said to my lawyer, and O'Melveny and Myers, who I had to bring from California because Frank Sinatra sued me in California, and I said, what do I do in this situation? He said, you tape everything. I said, you know something? You can't tape everything. It's hard to tape in a restaurant. Banging
Noises,
and crashing
ambient sound,
and the
right?
tape, and
Yeah.
it's in the middle of the table, and
Yeah.
the syrup gets, no. And I didn't know what, he said, just tape everything. Listen, this has just been great, bye-bye. Do you know, this was the only way I felt I could protect myself, and it worked. And it's worked on every book since. I interviewed over 800 people to write the Frank Sinatra book. I wrote each person a thank you note. I dated it. For instance, if I'd interviewed you, I would have written you a note tonight, typed it. Dear Carol, thank you so much for the interview we had at the Georgetown Club. It was so much fun. I didn't have time to compliment you on those black shoes you were wearing with the white soles. I thought they were super. I just love them. Do let me know where you got them. Anyway, again, thanks for your time. I appreciate all the information. Sincerely, Kitty. And I kept a copy because 4 years later, when the book is published, there will be so much. Now, some people will really have forgotten giving you an interview, but there'll be an awful lot of people who stand up and say, I didn't interview.
Need the details. Yeah.
And I cannot tell you the times. It happened especially on Nancy Reagan. People wrote to the CEO of Gulf and Western, which owned Simon & Schuster, and said, this is a scurrilous book, this woman, and we never talked to her.
Was she first lady when you were writing the book?
She had just left.
She had just left, okay.
And the lawyer, publishing lawyer, would call me and say, Kitty, we got another one. We got another one. Meaning people denying it. The publisher would ask me for my copy of the thank you note. I'd give it to the publisher, they'd send it off, and there would be no problem. The problem came up on the Bush book.
The Bush book was hyper controversial.
Very. It was very controversial. And George Herbert Walker Bush was
41, also known as 41.
41. He was upset, and because I had quoted in the book that George Herbert Walker Bush had changed his story of diving out of a plane during World War II. And he had given an original story many years before about when he went off to war, and then he had given a different story. And so I wrote about the different stories, and George Herbert Walker Bush called the publisher and said, this is it. This woman has to be stopped now. This is a lie. And the publisher was dying, absolutely.
A lot of blood pressure medicine for your publishers, right?
Exactly. Called me, and I said, I showed them the book. I said, George Herbert Walker Bush's name is on the cover of the book. And so the publisher said, fax up immediately, went back to Bush, and Bush said, oh, I forgot writing that, but she still is awful. So each book has been tough to write, but I have learned how to protect myself.
You certainly have.
You know,
You could teach a course in that alone, you know, but you
the
mentioned...
thank you notes are, part of it is being a member of the junior league. You know you're supposed to say
your
thank
manners
you.
and
But
tact, right, is a
knows?
shield. You mentioned how many people you've interviewed for Sinatra and Jackie. What's the most number of people you've interviewed for a book? Do you know?
I would say 800.
Yeah.
By doing that many interviews, sometimes the stories come back, the same stories come back
Yeah.
to you. But you have to interview. So often I've been criticized by male journalists who say, well, she didn't interview Senator so-and-so, she just interviewed the maid or the gardener or the this. I think you have to interview at all levels in a person's life
Oh my God,
because
yeah.
people are different with different people.
How many people have said to you, Kitty, I'm going to tell you this, but if you quote me, I'm going to deny it, or I'm going to say I never... And does that stop you, or do you say, fine, but I'm still going to use the information you gave me, and you can go ahead and deny it?
No, what I say is, okay, I understand how you feel, but who else knows your story? Tell me your story. Who else knows it? And then I will go to that person and ask about the story. You really do have to have 2 or 3.
Isn't Harvey Weinstein a perfect example of this?
Of what?
Well, of telling your story to somebody else, and that when the women came forward accusing him, they had already told their stories in almost real time at the time it happened of what had happened. So they had corroborating, it may not be...
No, it's corroboration. However, that's a perfect example because it shows you the fear people have. People are truly frightened sometimes of telling the truth, especially if the subject is someone like Frank Sinatra or Harvey Weinstein or the Queen of England.
Any powerful
or
person.
Really, any powerful person. People want to stay in their favor.
How then?
But they also want to tell the truth.
Yes. And do you think that can you tell, do you have a superpower that you can tell when somebody's telling you the truth? Or have you been fooled as much as you haven't been fooled?
No, I have no superpowers. As a matter of fact, when someone tried to tell me that Frank Sinatra had lied under oath or had I forget the story, it's been so long, but I found the woman involved, and she had started out life by the name of Anna Maria something in Hoboken, and by the time I found her, her name was Grace Parentis. And Frank Sinatra had claimed that he had never been arrested. And the only reason I was interested in that was he was going for a Las Vegas gaming license, and he swore under oath that he had never been arrested or jailed. And I found out that he had been arrested and he had been thrown in jail. But I had to find the woman because there was no public record. Nothing with the Hoboken police or the Jersey
No
City.
mugshot.
But no, well, there was a mugshot. But it was hidden.
Ah.
Anyway, I found the woman. I found her name, I found her address, I had the information, and then I have to tell you, I thought, what do I do? If I call her, she'll hang up on me, right? If I didn't know what to do. And I asked this friend of mine, a Chicago journalist, about 25 years older than me, he said, what's the problem? He said, you go knock on the door. I said, knock on the door? Yeah, you knock on the door. Oh, it's not polite. Anyway, I got my friend to drive me to Lodi, New Jersey. We pulled up in front of the house. And in Lodi, New Jersey, there was a whole block of white plaster of Paris statues of the Blessed Virgin like this. And she had one on her porch too, this lady. I couldn't get out of the car. I sat there, didn't know, I couldn't do it. Finally, I walked to the door, I knocked on the door, and this lovely gray-haired woman answered the door, and I said, Mrs. Garavini, my name's Kitty Kelley, and I'm from Washington. the words just, I wasn't making sense. I was so nervous. And she said, honey, you're so nervous. Well, do you want to come in? Let me give you a glass of water. I said, okay. So I walked in, sat down, and it was wonderful. I said, I am nervous, and the reason I'm nervous, I didn't know how to approach you. I have this story, and I have this time about when you had Frank Sinatra arrested on a morals charge in 1930-something. She said, right. Oh, she said, I said, could you tell me a little bit about it? So I was there for 2.5 hours. And now, I went in like this. By the time I came out, I was so full of myself. And Stanley was in the car, and he said, that took, I said, I know. It was just, anyway, that was a wonderful, wonderful story. So I put it in the book. The Sinatra book comes out. And I stayed in touch with her. She was really a lovely woman. We wrote back and forth. She sent me a plant. I sent her, I forget what it was. Her niece wrote me when the Sinatra book came out. And she said, this has really caused quite a bit of disruption in the family. She said, the younger generation is very proud of Great Aunt for telling her story and for being so honest. But the older members of the family are very, very upset. They feel humiliated and shamed. So,
But you just have to compartmentalize that, right?
yeah.
I mean, you learn. If you're going to write the books you write, you can't go to sleep at night thinking, oh, I can't believe I wrote that.
No.
Of the people you've written about, who among them have you met face to face?
None. I have met none when I was doing the book.
But
I did meet Oprah years before I wrote the book. Jackie, when you say met, just an introduction years before I wrote the book. But
none.
and
none.
Elizabeth Taylor, yes.
I feel in some ways like you and I intersect. During that time, I was producing for Larry King, and among my targets was Elizabeth Taylor. It took me a year to land the interview, and I probably had a much easier time of it than you did writing the book, because ultimately she wanted to do it. But it's just the layers of gatekeepers and people you go through, and it's just fascinating. Who was the woman? I want to say her last name was Chen, but I may have it wrong.
No, you're right, Chen Sam.
She was with them forever. That woman, I think she was as interesting as Taylor and Burton in a way, because her entire life seemed to me to be protecting them and looking out for them.
And getting their meds.
And getting their, well, see, I didn't have to deal with that.
She had a pharmaceutical license, and certain meds were very important to
Her
especially
clients.
Taylor.
Yeah.
Burton was more booze, but
She wanted her, well, because her face. You want to drink less. Speaking of face, so when I finally booked Elizabeth Taylor and she came to Washington to do the interview with Larry, I'm sitting in the break room with her and her hairdresser, Jose Bear, and her little white dog, Sugar, and we're just jet-jawing. There I am just having a conversation with Elizabeth Taylor, and she tells me about that whenever her face is too puffed up, she just covers it with lots of yogurt, and then that brings it down. So to this day, I use the Elizabeth Taylor treatment for bringing my face down.
oh, waiter.
But it was surreal that I was not getting an eyeshadow tip. I was not getting a lipstick tip. I was getting a puffy face tip.
That's
From
interesting.
Elizabeth Taylor. But
I really didn't start. It's my least favorite book.
why?
I wrote 7 biographies. It's my least favorite because I had hoped that I was going to be writing about the studio system and MGM, and it was how it shaped American fantasies and how the movies were so important to us. And I thought I'd use Elizabeth Taylor because she was the last star of the studio system.
Yeah.
And I had this all worked out. And then all of a sudden this life of hospitals and jewelry
Excess,
stores
yeah,
and doctors and
Yeah. Excess and wasted talent and,
right.
you know, it's, I mean, and at the very end for both of them, it got sadder, but I wonder if you look at now, you know, the world we live in now, we have Instagram, we have TMZ, we have, you know, I can go on my podcasts at night and listen to 15 different gossip podcasts that tell you what Taylor Swift just did an hour ago. You know, that the veil of mystery and secrecy is so much gone that was so present when you were writing your book. I mean, I remember waiting for your books to come out because there wasn't any other source of that kind of behind-the-scenes information, that kind of, quote, unauthorized biography. And now it's...
I will say that unauthorized does not mean untrue.
Okay, I know. Yes, thank you. No, that's an important footnote.
Just saying.
But now everything's known, and it's known so fast. You can track somebody's airplane on you know, you can track somebody's airplane if you want to, if you just get their tail number.
But you know something? I chose these people because I took them seriously. I think that they influenced our society in a way beyond fan magazine. They were a very, very important part of our society.
Culturally important.
And I don't know that we have that anymore. If you ask me now, who would I want to do?
Taylor Swift?
No, I mean, I think...
J.K. Rowling? Adele? Donald Trump? Okay, so wait, that was a plan. I want to note, and you tell me if this is a true story, that you were offered $4 million to write a book about Donald Trump, and you said, I'll give you the money back, I won't write it.
True. Do you have any more questions?
Tons, but who, you really can't think of somebody that, Putin?
No.
Okay.
I really can't. I mean...
So there must have been publishers who came to you with people to do that you turned down. Like, can you tell us?
I don't...
One?
But it's
Other
no, I'm
than
not
Trump?
being coy. It's just an old lady can't memory. I only concentrated, as I said, the least favorite book was Elizabeth Taylor. And the reason I did it was because a writer said, you've got to follow up Jackie O with an important female subject. And I really thought I loved biography. And by the time I was finished with Elizabeth Taylor, Lynn Nesbitt was my agent, and she said, Kitty, what about the next book? I said, no, I don't want to do it again. And she said, okay, this has been tough, but she said, if you did do a book, I said, well, I'd be interested in Frank Sinatra. Pete Hamill wouldn't do it, Gay Talese wouldn't do it, Jimmy Breslin wouldn't, but I'm not going to do it. Don't worry, but you did ask me. And that's when she called a couple of weeks later and asked me if I would come to New York. She said, you might want to wear blue jeans. Blue jeans. And she said, I just want you to look tough. Well, you know, you could ask me to do that after the Frank Sinatra book, because he did teach me about standing up and being tough. And when he sued me, he kept the lawsuit going for a year. And then his lawyers called and said, we'd like to make an announcement that the Sinatra-Kelley lawsuit is finished. And they called me, and I said, well, that's fine. I think Mr. Sinatra can make that announcement. I didn't sue him. He sued me. And they said, well, Kitty, come on now. He's dropping it. And I said, excuse me. I nearly lost a publisher over it. It's cost $100,000 in legal fees. Let him drop it himself. And that's what finally happened. So I did learn from him to be strong and send an awful lot of thank you notes.
We have just a little bit of time left, and I wanted to come up to the absolute moment we're in right now with, we've just gone through the Writers Guild strike and the actors are still out, but the big issue is AI, and especially with authors is an issue of AI. Do you feel that you are protected as an author from AI glomming onto your material that's out there, and do you have any protections that you've put in place?
No.
Do you care?
I care, but I can't fight every single time that somebody rips off 10 pages of the Elizabeth Taylor book or the Frank Sinatra book.
But you're involved with organizations that are probably fighting on behalf of authors to keep this.
I am,
safe.
and I believe strongly in Washington Independent Review of Books. I write for them, for Biographers International Organization. I care very much. I serve on their board. But the AI fight, that's a tough one.
Yeah. You're not going to make it your fight.
No. No. I absolutely will support it. Any violation of the First Amendment, of course I will support. Absolutely.
And then one other question is, since you've always lived here, do you consider Washington the most important city in the world?
Washington, the most important city in the world. It certainly has changed in the years that I've been here, but yes, I guess it is, if you consider the United States to be the most important country in the world, or at least the most democratic. And that's an important question today, given what's happened in Israel.
And it's in all your books, and Georgetown too, to some extent. You
Exactly.
know, that it's Georgetown's a legend. Washington's the most important city in the world, and
I do believe that. Yeah, I've never thought of it that way, but yes.
But I still think there's a book in you on Georgetown. Some of those secrets behind the doors we all walk by every day.
Well, if you all want to come my way.
Yeah, can you imagine the Kitty Kelley tour? Oh my God. Bus and cocktails. I love it. It's been great having you here. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
It's been great having all of you here. In 2 weeks, we're going to have Abby Lowell here. And then a few weeks after that, we're going to have Bill Cohen at Puck. So we've got a good season coming up. Thank you for starting it for us.
This is great. Thank you.
And you all be well. Take care. And thank you.